And welcome to the VSA Capital Tech and Transitional Energy podcast. It must be a Thursday. It's Thursday, December the 10th. Morning, Phil. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Andrew. And I was just saying, it's a bit chilly up here in Newmarket today, and got the gas central heating on, like a lot of people.
You should have a geothermal heat pump, Phil.
I know, and I know it's going to be coming. Yeah.
But Boris Johnson will be pleased you're working from home. You probably have to wear a mask working from home, even though you won't see anybody. But by the way, if you want to go for a big party, feel free, go for it. Anyone can have a party and mingle with as many people as you want. But don't even think about going to a library unless you're wearing a mask. Oh, don't get me going. This is a tech and transitional energy podcast, not a political broadcast. But by the way, the Raving Loony Monster Party have taken over. I actually always thought they were a really good party. But that clearly now the Conservatives have morphed into them, and we're being run by Bojo the Clown. He really has not got a clue. And look, for what it's worth, our head of research, Ollie, has got tested positive, has got Omicron, and he says it's actually just felt a bit ill for a day and nothing else, and that's it. I say, let's like chickenpox parties, get everybody out there, everybody catch it, get on with life. Anyway, it's not a political broadcast. Move on to tech and trans. I'll tell you what I'm going to kick off with. All right, I'm a little bit biased here, but I think listeners know that my son Alex is actually the portfolio manager for the Schroders Global Energy Transition Fund, which is about a £2.5 billion or dollar fund. I can never remember if it's pounds or dollars. Anyway, it's a bloody big fund in transition energy, and he's pretty smart. My son, smarter than me, which is very annoying. But he's been doing an advent calendar, Phil, and every day he comes up with a new idea for transitional energy stroke climate change, and I've been following him, and I thought I'd just mention a few of them to you and see what you think. And this is really throwing you on the spot because I don't think you've been following. But his first window, as he calls it, opening it up, was apparently there are some companies out there that have the ability to basically turn CO2 into plastic.
Right, and well,
they take waste CO2, and capture it, and then they create plastic out of it. I mean, what an incredible technology! I think we are unfortunately quite a long way from it actually going into what I describe as production.
Yeah.
But I mean, that would solve a lot of the issues.
It's a brilliant idea, isn't it? I don't know, God knows how you put that into practice in terms of, look at carbon capture and capturing CO2, but what a great bit of lateral thinking that is. Yeah,
well, his second window, which I must admit I found rather interesting, was apparently if you feed seaweed to cows, it reduces their methane emissions by as much as 2/3. And as we know, livestock accounts for almost a third of what I describe as human-caused methane emissions, which is, I mean, everyone's saying you shouldn't eat steak because it's bad for the climate. Well, give them seaweed and we can all eat steak again.
Yeah. Oh, well, you're right about the scale of the methane emissions from cattle, and lots of work for people gathering seaweed as well. But again, what an interesting idea.
Yeah, his third window was planting seeds by drones to create new forests. Apparently, this enables rapid speed in difficult terrains. I don't know if that's a brilliant new idea or not, but the next one is one that I do passionately believe in. Funny enough, his fourth window, which is basically educating girls more. And the reason he says that is quite simply that if you educate girls, they tend to have less. They tend to marry later and have fewer and healthier children. Excuse me. And what that means, of course, you have a smaller population. I am a true believer that it has been the rate of growth of our population which has just got out of control, and our population is too large for the planet, and that actually is the biggest cause of global warming, is our huge population. If you halved our population, we wouldn't have these sort of problems. So I do agree with him on that one. Now, he then, door number 5, I'm just rattling through these a little bit. By the way, if you want to follow what he's saying, go onto his LinkedIn page, Alex Monk at Schroders. He's got a really wacky one for his 6th one, or is it 5th one? I've lost track now. I think it's 5th actually. But he's talking about solar geoengineering. That's probably up your street. But he basically putting giant mirrors in space stratospheric aerosol injections, and marine cloud brightening. I don't know if you follow any of those or not.
The solar mirrors in space, yeah, I have seen technology in that area. And given the amount of launches that are proposed for satellite networks in space, there's probably something in that. But then don't you remember the James Bond film where they had the huge flipping solar reflector in space that was beaming all the energy down to Earth and burning everything up?
Of course, I remember. I love James Bond. I've watched them all so many times.
It was like GoldenEye, I think that one might have been. Oh, someone will correct me on that one.
Don't break out into song, please.
No.
Now, door number 6, as he puts it, actually is the he wants to see more static VAR compensators because he says the electricity grid is a Venus system of our energy complex, and it's not working smoothly unless you have these VRR compensators. Again, you probably understand that better than I do. Silence. Maybe you don't.
Yeah, is that voltage regulation? I wonder, but I tell you,
basically it's voltage regulation, correct? So
yeah,
it's to maximise the use of your energy, because we do an awful lot of energy gets wasted, and we just got to be more effective with it.
There's all sorts of grid challenges. I was just reading a big article this week about, it's in the Telegraph, about how a number of the energy producers are shifting, during the day from normal commercial production and commercial rates suddenly onto the grid's high backup tariffs, and this is costing the grid a fortune. Very interesting to the pricing dynamics, and of course it's all been, nowadays is controlled with software to do it. So anything that makes the network sort of more manageable and efficient. Voltage regulation, that's an interesting one, and probably quite a practical one as well.
Well, it's the sort of thing where some of the companies we're looking at,
yeah,
I think, we've talked a lot about Nexus infrastructure, but they've got, haven't they, they're sort of a little bit involved in this area, and connecting the whole sort of grid services alongside with EV charging. So you need to be able to control that whole voltage change as well, because you can have a very, very high voltage coming in to your sort of source, shall we say, and then you've got to get it down to a level that we can cope with in our homes and our chargers. So I've really put that into a dummy's language, haven't I?
Yeah, no, but you're right though. No, you do, and that's done with what are called inverters. The electronics tech that does that. Yeah, you've got to step it down to a level where it's practical. It's like with an EV charger for a car, which is running at a couple of hundred volts, and you've got the electronics, silicon chips in there running at probably 5 volts, and you have to kind of step it all down and control it with inverters. But it's such, that an area is a practical one for development and investment in tech. But to regulate all those power supplies. No, that is an interesting area. Yeah. Wow.
There's actually, I think, a lot of money to be made there, and it's no one's really, I think, yet done something big and dynamic in the stock market that can show that. So watch this space, maybe.
Yeah.
Anyway, let me give you a couple more windows, because window number 7 was, I thought, rather an interesting one. It's some interesting statistics here, and that is that, I don't know if you know this, but the average person uses 11 bottles of shower gel and 10 bottles of shampoo a year, and obviously that creates a huge amount of plastic waste, and apparently we consume 36 kilograms of plastic waste per year through these sort of bottles in the bathroom, shall we say.
Yeah.
And there's a lady called Jonah, I think it's a lady, Jonah Brettenhuber, who's developed a bottle made from soap that is effectively the packaging for the liquid, and then once you've used it, you just use it as a soap, and that would save a huge amount of plastic, and therefore all the nasty stuff that generates the plastic.
Oh, that's brilliant. I know that sounds like a fantastic idea. And I wonder if she could develop an equivalent for like gin and tonic, for like tonic water. All those plastic. No, but you see all those plastic tonic water bottles, as well. Because I know some of the soda siphon makers or whatever now, you can add in sort of tonic mix, but those sort of.
I don't want my gin and tonic in a soap bottle.
No. But that's the sort of brilliant thinking that we need, and to get financial backing. But I love that one with the shampoos.
I'll give you one more, which is door number 8. Then I'll move on, and people can just go and follow him himself.
Yeah.
But actually, door number 8 is all about how to help with the climate again, which I was not aware of at all. But he says the global clothing industry accounts for up to 10% of all the carbon we emit each year, which I was amazed by. And it's also used an enormous amount of wastewater, almost 20% of all the wastewater we use. So what he's saying is an average pair of jeans requires almost a kilo of cotton, and that a kilo of cotton needs about 10,000 litres of water, which is about 10 years worth of drinking water for every person. And it has an equivalent of 30 kilograms of carbon embedded in it, which is the equivalent to driving 70 miles in an average car. Now, he also tells me that between 20 to 40% of clothes purchased are actually never worn. And so if we were more careful with our clothing, we would actually cut down our carbon emissions dramatically and save an awful lot of water. That's a bizarre statistic, isn't it?
Yeah, 10%. 10%.
It's extraordinary. Now, look, if you don't believe me, by the way, again, go and check out the author. But I thought they were interesting facts, and I hope everyone listening found them interesting too. Too bad if you didn't, because I've already done them. Anyway, I've actually been rather busy this week as well, so I've had a slight shortage of perhaps of news. But Phil, what do you want to talk about this week?
Well, again, okay. As we're on sort of lateral ideas in the space, I did pick up this week. See that Siemens Gamesa, who we know very well, working with our client Invinity, but they're looking at. We talked a bit about this, about generating hydrogen directly in wind turbines using electrolyzers. And they made an announcement this week, and they said that they're working with a Holland-based company called Stroom, who developed thermoplastic composite piping, and they're looking at developing piping for a new breed of offshore wind turbines, which will be directly producing green hydrogen, actually at the turbine, and piping that ashore, and working with electrolyzers on the turbines. So again, going back to sort of Alex's themes of quite really lateral thinking here, but now being directly applied. So they just started that development work. So that was very interesting.
Yeah, I think as we see these huge wind farms being developed, and of course around the UK we are seeing huge ones, both in the North Sea and now actually also on the West Coast. And we're starting to see massive wind farms being planned for on the east coast of North America. We are going to see more and more that they are not just for energy, but also, as you say, for creating hydrogen. I mean, the power they can generate is just massive. And obviously, currently, an awful lot of that power that they generate is just thrown away because we don't have the energy storage to store it, and it just isn't required for the grid at certain times. I believe the statistic is that every year out in the UK, we waste about a million homes worth of energy. Which is just huge. And that's a whole year's worth of energy. And we're just throwing it all away. It's crazy. So actually getting more of these sort of uses is very sensible. We are going to what's known as an SWB world, which is solar, wind and batteries. And the statistics show that by 2050, 80% of all the world's energy will come from SWB. And I actually happen to believe it. Whilst you're on, by the way, Siemens Gamesa stroke Invinity Energy Systems, just worth mentioning the Invinity Energy Systems open offer. The deadline for applying actually is Monday. I think it's at 12 noon, but you'll find no one will accept your money on Monday. You need to get it in today if you want to do the open offer. The open offer is obviously at £1, but you also get a half warrant at £1.50 and a half warrant at £2.25. And currently the stock is trading at 102.5. So you should be applying for that open offer because you'll make an immediate profit on the stock and you get those warrants thrown in for free, and they're quite valuable warrants.
Okay, right. That's a fair point, actually, in the timing of that transaction. Just to close out on this one, Andrew, and I think it's quite important, is if like Siemens Gamesa turbine developer start to design the turbines so that they've got all this infrastructure hooked onto them, then it starts to become a standard design for a turbine rather than just having a straight direct pillar supporting a propeller. There's a lot more around the things. And that, and that's a change in psychology as to how they're used as well. So I think it's quite important. I don't know if you've got a Porsche, Andrew. I don't think you do you?
I don't have a Porsche. I'm afraid I'm not nearly successful enough to be an investment banker with a big Porsche. I leave that to all my friends. This will make you laugh. I drive a Citroen Saxo 1.3, but actually the good thing about that is I don't have to pay a ULEZ charge in London.
Really? Hey, gosh, you don't, do you? Well, I've got a 10-year-old Mini Cooper. Right. Anyway, so this hooks into VW, and a lot of news flying around this week about VW potentially selling Porsche, who've developed the electric Taycan, but VW selling that to raise capital to develop its electric vehicles, which is quite. We've seen some massive announcements from VW about electrification and money it's putting into electrification, but it's just what I think is really key here for investors is that there are, we talked about a number of companies and quoted companies that are involved in the vehicle electrification space, but it's reflecting the level of commit here, but also some of the challenges are being highlighted in terms of rare earths, which we've discussed, battery technology we've discussed, charging infrastructure. So I thought that's quite a significant announcement, and also, of course, the industry there is struggling to move from ICE. The engineering needed for internal combustion engines was a total different type of engineering, using electric motors, using inverters and power control, and how that's all going to work. But companies that we talked about, we did our picks and shovels thing on a regular basis that are involved in this whole space. So that's an interesting one from Europe's biggest car maker.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting how really you and we ought to go to, I think, Norway. And you're going, oh my God, Andrew's lost the plot. But I don't know if you know this, but in Norway, they basically are already, I think it's, let me get the right statistics so I don't get this wrong. The share of EV sales is 76% already.
Fucking whoa.
Yeah. And they will basically be ICE, as you call it, internal combustion engines, will be phased out by 2025. The whole country will be EV. Now, look, I don't think in EV they have so much range anxiety because in Norway, rather, I'm not sure how far they travel. But, we ought to go and see how they're working it all. And obviously, it's a much smaller population. But, they're there. They're there already. It's happening. Interesting enough, Sweden is their share will be 32%, the Netherlands 25%, and Iceland 49%. They're the top countries around Europe in terms of moving to EV. But I mean, again, those are big market shares in a very short time period. So it is happening. And the UK comes up. UK and France actually are around about sort of 11-12% currently. And these things do happen pretty quickly.
Well, it can show us how it's done in terms of getting the infrastructure up and running.
That's why I need to go out and visit it. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh wow. And Norway's lovely. Aha. Well, before. Well, listen. On the subject of EV infrastructure, I saw that GridServe, their private UK company, I think Hitachi put money into them early in the year, but they're rolling out motorway EV charging points in the UK. Made an announcement this week that they're going to put in another 20 electric hubs across the country, and each hub will have 6 to 12 350 kilowatt chargers. Wow, they're really high power chargers. So that was an announcement from them, and you can see that things are developing at a pace in that space.
Very good.
So
what about any? Have you got any news in tech and transition or RNSs that have come out?
Oh, yes, I do. It's a quiet period for company results, but there's a few that I spotted this week. Somero Enterprises Incorporated, ticker is SOM, market cap 300 million. I don't know if you've come across this company before.
No.
Okay, well, it's American based, and they produce laser guided machinery for concrete placement. And concrete placement, if you ever go in any big if you might have concrete floors in your own home, but this is for commercial buildings, concrete leveling, and they supply customers in 90 countries. And of course, if you've got a massive warehouse, e-commerce hub site, or whatever, they'll have a lot of concrete flooring in there. And so they had a trading update, and it was for sort of current financial year, and they've said they've seen strong trading momentum continue in the second half. So remember, this is sort of construction exposed, and there would have been a slowing of activity, as we went into the height of the COVID crisis. So they've reported a very good period. And they've said that they expect to exceed previous guidance, which they actually gave in September at their interims, and in the September interims they upgraded as well. But what I found, there's a number of things that are quite interesting about this. Their first half revenues to June was $64.4 million, and on that they made an adjusted EBITDA of $24.6 million. So that's a very high, quite a high margin. And yet, if you look at the stock, it appears to be, and this is from Icon estimates, trading on the EV revenue multiple of 2.8, EV EBITDA of 8, and a PEG ratio, which is something that we like to look at, which is sort of P to earnings ratio. You look for sometimes a ratio below 1, a PEG ratio of 0.3. So I was just on the face of it, Andrew, as a recovery play and looking at the valuation. That one looked very interesting.
Yeah, I hadn't seen that. I did spot that Dark Trace announced this week, and it's only just floated, and it's now starting a share buyback program, which is pretty bizarre, really. But it's been kicked out of the FTSE 100. I guess if your stock's down 36% over 3 months, what else are you going to do other than buy all the stock back you flogged off a lot higher in your IPO? Actually, it's pretty disappointing, really. And I also noticed this week, of course, Elliott Advisors have upped the ante on SSE, and so they should, I think. SSE really should be. I mean, I think everyone's coming out and saying it's worth 20 or 21 pounds, and it's sort of stuck down here at 16 pounds. I mean, let's just get the end of the story out of the way, guys, and get the stock up to that level.
Yeah, well, you've talked a lot about SSE, and with good reason there, and you can see what other advisors are up to. But it's all about extracting value out of businesses, getting the real value out of them. But that's it's a pity about Dark Trace, isn't it? Buying back shares already, but as you say, well, what do you do when the shares are falling like that? Did you see the results I saw this week was SDI Group PLC, the ticker's SDIS. It's 190 million market cap, and this is the sort of business I always find I like as a techie at heart, quite interesting. They design and manufacture scientific instrumentation essentially, but primarily for digital imaging. And they develop specialist cameras that will go onto things like advanced microscopes. And they're used for developing all sorts. Microscopy is used across drug developments, developing semiconductors, developing all sorts of new materials, but also imaging cameras for space imaging as well. So the sort of kit that you will find in lots of laboratories. They've just reported that they've seen the interims, their group revenues were up 75%. Now, part of that is through acquisition, and they acquired a couple of companies. So, with sales going from 14 million to 25 million, always look at the detail. And of that, 4.6 million of sales, I think, was from acquired businesses. But there are other businesses, grew by about 22%. So organic revenue growth of 42%. And I think what's quite interesting about this type of company, it's also what we call a portfolio company, where they acquire, put together lots of kit but into similar markets, is that the sort of structural growth in scientific discovery, and spend is coming back. So that was a good set of results, I thought, for SDI Group.
Yeah, actually, just talking about which, we are. I've recorded 2 webinars this week, by the way. One is for the Superseed Feeder Fund, which is a VC early stage tech venture capital fund. Very, very interesting. We will actually be floating that in. We've just started the process, the roadshow. We're going to close it, I think, on January the 12th next year to give people a chance over Christmas. But it's a very clever way. They're tied up with the British Business Bank of getting into early stage business automation VC money. It's a unique way of doing it. You can put this in your ISAs, your SIPs, etc., etc. You wouldn't normally be able to put VC type things like that into there. So that's very interesting. If you want to watch the webinar, do ask. And I also just did a webinar for a company we're floating. It's basically a cash shell called Spiritus Mundi. And that's going to be a cash shell in the clinical diagnostics area. So it's more biotech than tech. But again, that we will be bringing to the market. Actually, I think we're going to close that next Friday, hopefully. So a couple of IPOs that we bring to the market in this space. And again, 2 webinars. If people want to have a listen, just after the webinars.
Excellent. You have been busy. Wow.
Always busy, Phil. And of course, tomorrow you're coming into town because I have my annual ARM Christmas lunch. I was back in the early 90s very involved with ARM and getting it going. And I have an annual lunch with Sir Robin Saxby and some of the other team members, and also some of the advisors and fund managers that were involved with me back in the 90s. And you're joining for the first time, Phil.
I feel very privileged, and it's very kind of you to invite me. Yeah, I can't wait for that.
Well, let's it'll be hopefully lots of fun. That tends to be how we do it. Anything else, Phil, you want to mention? Should we call it a day there?
I think we can call it a day there. Yeah.
Okay, and we will probably try and get another recording in next Thursday, but then we'll probably take some time off for Christmas.
Oh, that would be great.
I'm such a nice boss, aren't I? I let people have Christmas Day off.
Yes, you are indeed.
Finally, as I say every time, anybody got anything they want us to talk about, just let us know. Any comments, let us know. We're always here to try and help make this the most interesting tech and transitional energy podcast out there. Thanks a lot, and speak next week.
Chat next week.